we're behind the scenes. That's where we should be. So if you never hear about Fluid Pay, that's a perfect scenario for us. We want our ISOs and our partners to take the applause.
Well, James, we had a very fluid interview today, wouldn't you
Oh,
say?
wow. Goodness, Patty, that was a great play
I
on words
couldn't
there.
resist it. I couldn't resist it.
Yeah. So we interviewed Nick from Fluid Pay, which is a fantastic gateway. Not as well known as you would think, because even though they're massive, they're very much behind the scenes. They do a complete full white label for their ISO partners. So we have a great interview talking about what's needed from a gateway provider. Talk to us about the insiders today, Patty.
I just brought up the topic of junk fees and how this is a really hot topic in legislative and regulatory circles, and just sort of, something we need to keep abreast of.
Yeah, no, it's one thing I want to say before we dive into this particular interview, Patty, is that so FluidPay is not, they've not paid us any money for advertising or sponsors. It probably seems like they did the way I was kind of
The way you were
talking
talking,
about them.
but you love them, obviously.
I am genuinely, in this case, I am genuinely a very happy client. And so we have started working with FluidPay with a couple of my software companies, and our experience has just been so good that kind of just comes through naturally in the interview.
Yeah, I could tell.
So yeah, I'm a big fan. So that's very unusual for me, which I realize. So, everybody can take that with a grain of salt. I'm very biased because I've been using it and it's fantastic. So, but they're not a paid sponsor or anything like that. But yeah, with that in mind, this episode is brought to you by Nativia Banking, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But let's dive into this interview with Nick from FluidPay. Hey everybody, we are here today with Nick Cucci, who is the founder and chief operating officer over at FluidPay. How you doing today, Nick?
Good, good. How about you guys?
Doing fantastic.
Doing wonderful.
Yeah, so I'm excited to talk today about gateways. What do ISOs need in terms of a white label solution? What do ISVs need as we move into this kind of new reality of integrated payments? So we have a lot of really cool things to talk about. But before we dive into any of that, Nick, I want to hear your story. How did you get into this crazy industry? And give us a little bit of your journey to what you're doing today.
And
Yeah.
maybe just mention something about that race car behind you.
Yeah. But yeah, I've actually been in the industry since I was 15. I was a sophomore in high school at Lake Park.
Wow.
So it's been a while, crazy stories. So my dad, Ted Cucci, and Jim McKenzie back in the day started an internet service provider. So they were reselling dial-up. Company was called Interwise, and that was a hot thing back in the day.
Right.
So that quickly turned into a domain registrar, which was called It's Your Domain. They had it for about 7 years, I believe, and fraud started to run rampant. So they developed a tool called I Spy Fraud, and that's where I came in high school. Basically, I Spy Fraud was a rule set that would take transactions and flag them for review. So I would manually every day after school go in and review the transactions, see where the IP addresses were and everything, and approve or deny those. They
Wow.
quickly, yeah, it was crazy. They quickly got tired of paying the credit card processing fees. So my dad and Jimmy decided, let's process our own credit cards. And then they started doing it for friends, and it quickly turned into NMI. So they sold It's Your Domain to Two Cows, which was another registrar, and NMI was born. So kind of,
Wow.
that's a pretty crazy story.
It is a great story. So, and then what was the connect the dots for us from NMI to FluidPay? What was that journey like?
So I worked at NMI. I was there for roughly 13 years.
Okay.
Basically since its inception. They sold NMI in 2014, and it's been an awesome ride that none of us could have predicted.
Right.
But basically, Jeff and I, we decided like, oh, cool, we're going to do a Ford dealership. This is after NMI.
Right.
So we went and worked at a Ford dealership for 4 years, and I was kind of just there, and I'm like, you know what? I miss the payments industry, and so did Jeff. I'm like, let's potentially look at, originally we started building a CRM, and then it went to a payment gateway. And I'm like, cool, let's go back into the industry. It's what we know and what we're at. So
that's great. That's
it
great.
was a lot of fun. We kind of, to be honest with you, we kind of learned what not to do, Jeff and myself. Jeff was a system administrator, network admin at NMI, and we were tied to servers and everything else. And as the cloud started to gain more traction while we were at the car dealership, we figured out a way to not be tied to so many physical servers, and it gives you a better footprint because we're able to have multiple internet grids with we use GCE, Google Compute Engine.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
just the scalability is amazing, and it
Yeah.
just made a lot of sense.
Wow. Very
Yeah.
cool. Well, and I
Very
think to
cool.
give a little extra context here was so the way that Nick and I and Jeff met is I have several ventures going on right now on the technology side where we decided to go with FluidPay. I got introduced from a couple other people in the industry, and it's a really interesting story. I have to share this here before we get into the interview because I think it's so interesting. So my developers so my business partner is an amazing developer. Jack Christensen's fantastic. So my business partner and my lead developer. Well, we were doing some deals with some ISVs and stuff. And we're like, all right, this is going to be easy. We just need a gateway. You know, this will be fine. This is no problem. I'm sure this is a solved problem. Like everyone has a fantastic gateway with a great API that has awesome documentation for the developers.
Uh-huh.
Actually, no one does.
Uh-huh.
So we were like, what in the world? So we would go one to the next, to the next, to the next. And every single one, it was like, well, they don't have this feature that we need, or they don't have
I
any.
have
And then
that
the other,
feature
the
or
next one,
whatever.
well, they have no documentation. The next one, well, they don't, it's like, what in the world? So, yeah, so I could share all kinds of crazy stories, but I won't. But at any rate, we eventually found FluidPay. And, I got this email, which I think I forwarded to you, Nick. I can't remember if I did or not, but did you see this email from Jack? The one so he sent this email to me, and Jack is like one of the most pessimistic is the wrong word, but it's pretty close. He's very realistic. I'm the optimist, right? He's the pessimist.
Yeah.
So his like praise is like, this isn't terrible. Like that's from him. That's like, wow, that's good. So he
Yeah.
sends this glowing email about FluidPay and how amazing it is. And the documentation is fantastic, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, okay, we got to get them on the podcast there. It must be great.
Must be that
So
great if Jack likes it.
if Jack likes it, it's really good. So with that context, I think it's really easy, at least for me, Nick. I always like to start off and I'm like, oh yeah, tell me about the ISV and tell me about the ISO and how they interact with FluidPay. But ultimately, all of us are driven here by the merchant, right? So when we think about the merchant, the modern small business owner, what do they need in terms of like from the payments industry? And how do you see FluidPay and kind of the gateway fitting into that kind of narrative, their experience?
Yeah. So obviously we all know that merchants are the ones that are driving the ISOs, ISVs. Your ISVs are, just to keep everything simple, your ISVs are the guys that are integrating into their software to facilitate the payments. So, and major shout out to Jeff Rooney, my partner and co-founder of FluidPay. He's a hybrid. He's a network admin and a programmer. So we are 100% without a doubt API first. And that's extremely important, especially if you're an ISO going after ISVs, which makes all the sense in the world,
Yep.
because ISVs want to automate things. They want the easiest path, the path of least resistance, right? Makes the most sense. So we developed our entire UI is we ingest our own API. We don't have any hidden calls. So we have partners that white label our solution, that they'll go create their own UI using our API, or they'll just white label our gateway, change the name of products and everything like that. So we're kind of like a hybrid approach to everything. We can function however it is that you want. And the best way for us that we like is we're behind the scenes. That's where we should be. So if you never hear about FluidPay, that's a perfect scenario for us. We want our ISOs and our partners to take the applause.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think
excellent.
before Patty, you get to your question, one thing
Yeah,
I want to
sure.
clarify: some of our audience may not understand what API first means, right? But you can't overstate how important this is. And so what I mean by that is what we found in the industry over and over and over again is you have legacy payment companies that have been around for a long time. And they have a lot of functionality, right? They have a lot of things they can do. They can process payments. They can do underwriting. They can handle risk, right? On and on and on the list goes. They can process payments, obviously, right? And then they're like, well, now there's integrated payments. So what we need to do is we need to build an API on top of this thing that we already have.
This massive.
And let's see if we can make something that a developer could potentially use.
As
That will
opposed
not
to
work. No, you have to say, hold on, scratch like let's assume we have nothing.
right.
We need to build something for developers. What would be ideal for them to utilize? And you build your API where it's API first, meaning you don't think about, well, what all do we already have? And let's see if we can make an API version of that. No, what should the API look like? And then structure everything on your own API. So I just wanted to clarify that term because It's really important. So anyway, with that being said,
That's
Pat, I
a
know you're
really
about to ask a
important
question.
distinction,
So
James.
Yeah.
Thank you for making that clarification.
Yeah, no,
So,
definitely. And the API, the thing I think that gets overlooked is you need to keep it simple. You
yes,
shouldn't have, we literally have
right,
integrations, and I can't stress this enough. They're fully integrated into us in 10 or 15 minutes. It should be that way. It shouldn't be so convoluted. And to be honest with you, these legacy systems that are out there, they're not agile. They're
no,
tied to
no.
databases, and it just becomes a nightmare, and it's a really big ship to steer. So that's why
yeah,
when we built Fluid Pay, we knew that we needed to keep in mind that we have to be reliable and scalable. You have to have that
Right.
scalability, especially dealing with ISVs.
yeah.
You
That
know,
kind of goes to the question that I had, Nick, which was, what type of technology are merchants, are merchants looking for? What are ISOs bringing to the market in terms of gateway to provide, you know, direct to merchant experiences?
yeah, definitely. So that's the cool part is we have products such as Simple Payments, which is basically a hosted payment page that we host at Fluid Pay. So you get merchants, the hot thing even 15 years ago was, oh, I need a pay now button.
Right,
So that was always a thing. So we figured, okay, well, let's, take it a step further, and we'll actually create a web page that we host, and you build it inside of our UI. So you're just uploading your
right.
background image. It
Mhm.
supports recurring billing. They can create recurring plans. They can buy products. It just simplifies it. So, that can be tailored towards large merchant or small merchant. And we're seeing a lot of mom and pop shops that, may want an internet presence, but not have a developer on hand. So
Sure,
that
sure.
solves the situation for your smaller merchants, and then our larger merchants can use our API or our UI to cater to their needs as well.
Okay,
We
so,
also have another product that's worth mentioning is Tokenizer.
uh,
So yeah, we basically it's hosted by us. We're able to pull them outside of PCI compliance. It's an iframe that gets injected on their website.
mhm.
It's pretty cool. So basically, the user keys in the card, it comes to Fluid Pay. We issue a temporary token, and then your response on the back end, you can tell us, hey, just process the credit card. Don't worry about storing it in the customer vault, or process the card, store it in the customer vault, and we'll tie it to a recurring subscription. So we kind of just offer the flexibility for whoever it is that wants to process credit cards. It's your choice how you want to intake them. We're just
What
Yeah,
here for you.
One thing I want to follow up on though, Nick, just to clarify something. So let's say for that ISO that's not really thinking as much about ISV, not thinking about API, right? So they want to go to merchants and offer them something where they can like email invoices or whatever. You mentioned hosted payment pages. Are there any other kind of non-developer, like that kind of like any other features along those lines for me? I'm just a sales rep. I don't understand all this tech stuff. I just want to have some kind of white labeled thing that I can go give to somebody who wants to get payments and use a virtual terminal, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. So that's the cool part with our virtual terminals. We've got over 20 products inside of it, and it's all inside of the virtual terminal. So, a big thing in the industry right now has been text to pay has been a
right,
huge,
Yes.
there's been a
right.
huge increase in that. So we have the ability through our products to support text to pay, especially from our e-invoicing solution. We even took it as far as showing, email deliverability to the merchants. So when
Mm,
they email something out, they can see, hey,
They
the
opened it.
customer opened it and
Mm.
everything else. So it
right,
it
right.
just adds another level of visibility for the merchants, and that all is inside of our UI.
Mm.
So our straight API integration, we also have all the shopping carts. So if you want WooCommerce, Magento, whatever it is, we've got integrations into those as well. So again, we kind of cater to every type of ISO in that sense. We're not, pigeonholing ourselves to a specific ISO.
Right.
Right, right, right. So what about like, okay, the ISO that wants to go after ISVs? Can you maybe talk about the difference between a general software white label and a true API white label, and why this matters when going after ISVs?
Yeah. So we have multiple types of white labelings, and you'll see when you white label with us, it's not just simply like, oh, hey, we're going to buy an SSL certificate and slap a logo on there.
Uh-huh.
It's way more than that. We have a DOS mitigation service that sits in front of the gateway to keep you protected. Um, our branding, the API is fully branded. So every API call that you submit is to your domain specifically. And it's not, app.fluidpay.com. It can be app.whatever-you-want.com. And
Right.
we maintain that transparency for you. So
Okay.
there's no extra work or extra layers. The API doesn't change.
Uh-huh.
It's the same API. You submit to your URL that you've
Yeah,
assigned to us.
that sounds
Mhm.
really straightforward.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
it keeps it simple. That's, it doesn't have to be so complicated.
Right, it doesn't. No, it
yeah,
doesn't need to
well,
be.
well, it doesn't have to be, and I think though it's like it's not complicated because you guys have done the complicated work to make it not complicated. Like it,
Right.
the idea like for those of you again don't quite understand the API side of things, like when you a lot of times companies will come out and say we have a quote unquote white labeled gateway. Well, yes and no. When you actually go to an ISV and say, oh, here's our gateway, use this, it's going to take a good developer about 30 seconds to realize it's not your gateway and figure out whose it is. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
now that hurts your branding a little bit because it's like, well, now you're not really a technology company, right? And also because they're going to be like thinking, well, wait a minute, should we just go direct to this gateway? Do we even need this
Right.
processor?
Right.
Whereas what FluidPay has is the idea of the documentation that the developers read, the URLs in the APIs itself, that is all yours. And so that is a really big deal because if you're trying to go after ISVs, you want to be able to say, yeah, you can integrate with our gateway, and you want to be able to mean that. And have them when they go there be like, wow. And the other thing is too, and Nick, I'm kind of selling you more than I normally do my interviewees, but we're in the midst of working with you. So, the truth of the matter is, if you go an ISV and you're like, hey, here's our gateway, and it looks like it's 15 years old,
Yeah.
Probably is.
and you're like, yeah, we started 3 years ago. They're like, no, this gateway was built like in the 90s. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so, whereas with something like a FluidPay, you want like that modern API that actually ends up, looking really good. So, I mean, I'm wondering, is there anything else, Nick, that you want to highlight as far as the ISVs themselves, right? So the ISV comes to you, they want to do an integration, the ISO cares about the white label, right? So they can present it as their gateway. What do the ISVs actually care about though?
That's the one thing I can't stress enough. The ISVs care about automation tools. They
Yes.
want to automate everything, and
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
should be easy for them to automate. They should not have to, you know, figure out how to automate something by looking at their API. Our API is already automated. So if you want auto boarding or whatever it is you're looking for, it's already there. You're not recreating the wheel. And the way we view ISVs here is they're basically sub-agents of ISOs, if that makes sense.
Right.
They're essentially an ISO too, but usually they come on through an ISO and they kind of lean on the ISO for the payments experience.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's kind of where the disconnect is, or at least that we see with other platforms, is they don't have a good solution for that. The ISOs will just say, hey, here's their API, and they'll send them a list of 5 or 6 different APIs that tie into the same company. And then you've got these companies that have turned around and purchased 5 other companies but haven't integrated anything in. And there's
It's
too
like
many
spaghetti.
APIs floating out there. It just, at that point, it's too convoluted, too confusing.
Yeah.
And you've got, multiple gateways now. They're charging more for level 3 processing. They're touching basis points. They're starting to underwrite merchants, which is, for us, huge no. We will never underwrite merchants. We have no business in doing that. No interest, never. We want our partners. We built this company on innovation and trust, and you can't have one without the other. We're not meant to sign up merchants. That's what our partners do. We just want to support the ISOs.
Yeah, and I
Right.
think ultimately it's like I've talked about this so much on the podcast. Like the winners in the future are going to be either your vertical specific ISV solutions where they have payments in house, they have a complete experience for the merchant, and then you have platforms and these technology platforms that are enabling these vertical specific ISVs to do that. And again, I think FluidPay is a really good example of that, of kind of having that platform approach and being able to help a lot of different companies out there. So okay, so I thought what would be really helpful here, because I always struggle with this topic a little bit, Nick, because our audience, a lot of them are they're not developers, right? And so, but they want to go after ISVs. but they just don't quite understand, right, how this all works. So I thought it might be helpful to kind of break it down a little bit and give a couple of examples maybe. So let's start with a really simple ISV card not present solution. So
Mhm.
web-based software solution, they just need a payment integration. And so I'm an ISO and I'm gonna white label Fluid Pay and I want to be able to go to this ISV that has a web-based solution. They have a vertical specific solution for a niche. What's the functionality that I want to talk about with that ISV that Fluid Pay provides?
Yeah, definitely. So typically that ISV, one, they're going to ask you for the API 100% of the time. That's the first thing they're going to look at. They want to see that the calls are simple. How do I process a sale, refund, void? And then if they're using, say, it's the healthcare industry and they have an ERP, they want to integrate that ERP simply into the gateway. And for, say, card present, we have several semi-integrated terminal solutions that have been integrated into our API as well for card not present or card present. So a single integration supports all of them. We're also actually in the process of finalizing our EMV cert with a true mobile swipe that can actually function as basically a full-blown POS. We have a mobile app around this EMV cert as well called Processa, and Processa supports anything from basic mobile payment acceptance to a point of sale solution, including things like table management and invoice management, all through the same software. So it just kind of depends on the ISV and what direction
Right.
they want to run, because they've got pretty much any avenue with us to do that, and we can help support them as well.
So go back for 1 second to the card present. So let's talk about that for just a minute. I have a couple other follow-ups there to make sure our audience understands what you're saying. So first of all, let's say I'm trying to sell an ISV and they have a retail point of sale solution, right? So people come to the counter and they check out at the point of sale system, right?
Mhm.
Can you explain like what is the actual like consumer experience using a semi-integrated device? Like what does that actually mean as far as for the point of sale company so that ISOs can kind of understand that concept?
Yeah, definitely. So to break it down and keep it simple, we have, if you're using one of our semi-integrated terminals, you will wake up the terminal. The device is hardened. So this is one of the cool points with this is you can leave this device plugged in. No one can hack it. They can't touch it. It's not connected to anything. You have to trigger that terminal to wake up from our virtual terminal. So the computer that, typically when you check out is right next to the terminal.
Mhm.
They'll put the dollar amount in, and you can set up recurring, whatever it is that they want to do from there. It'll wake up the terminal. The consumer knows no different. For them, it's just putting in a card and running a transaction.
Right.
So there's zero difference in that aspect from the consumer standpoint.
Yeah, and so to clarify that, and I'll tell me if I get this right, Nick. So the idea being, I own this point of sale company. When I get ready to run a transaction from that system, if I'm running through this Fluid Pay integration or any integration like that that's semi integrated, then I'm going to use the API to send a message to the cloud and say I need to run this transaction on this particular terminal ID. Well, Fluid Pay says, okay, we know what terminal ID. It's the one that's sitting right next to the point of sale system. So you send a
Mhm.
signal down, wake up that terminal and say, light it up and say the transaction total is $47.63. So,
Yeah.
right, then the consumer puts their card in or tap to pay or whatever it is. When then it sends a transaction back up to Fluid Pay. Fluid Pay then runs a transaction. If let's say it's approved, then it sends a signal back to the point of sale system that says transaction complete. Here's the approval code. And so this is all automated. So the experience for the consumer is very seamless, but for the point of sale company, it's a very, very easy way to do a payment integration for a card present solution.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
It basically can't get any easier than the semi-integrated solution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
It
So,
requires zero programming on their end. And
right.
again, not to confuse anyone, but they can send an API call or just use the virtual terminal and it'll wake up the device and ready to run the transaction.
Yeah, that's awesome. Right. Exactly. I didn't think about that. Yeah, that's an even
Mhm.
simpler way to do it in some cases. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
so we have like a great examples, car dealerships. You've got,
Yep.
and only because we know them pretty well, but
Yeah.
the sales department, right? You've got the finance department, you've got service, you've got the
Right.
service writers. So it doesn't even matter. You could have 50 terminals. You can wake up any of them from the virtual terminal, even at your cashier, if they're going to check out for service or however the store does it. You're not limited to any, you can do whatever it is that you need to do. Trigger, wake up any device
Yeah.
with no issue.
Yeah, so I think it's like, ultimately the real question for ISOs today, it does come down to this whole buy versus build, right? And you're going to say, okay, what am I need to offer a gateway technology, right? Do I just pay for this service or do I build it myself? And I think we're getting to a point on the gateway side with solutions like Fluid Pay to where it's pretty difficult. And this is interesting because we went through all this and we literally, I didn't tell you this, but we had our conference. We have a lot of developers. So we had our whole conversation. Okay, we just need to build a gateway. This is ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like, let's just build our own. And when you actually get into that and you go, oh, this is what that's going to cost, right? And this is what we're going to build as a result. You're like, ugh,
Yeah.
no.
It's a lot.
Versus,
Once you start looking at those processor integrations, I mean,
yeah,
it's going to take a year basically per processor if you're on
right,
time with everything.
exactly,
It's a lot. That's kind of why we just chose, again, we'll never underwrite. We don't want to compete with our partners. We love our partners here.
right,
It just all falls in line. We're a gateway and we know that. We
right.
haven't lost our identity. We're not looking to, put our hands in other things. We just want to be your gateway provider.
Yeah, I like it. So and then when you take all of that tech and then you're like fully white labeled. And that's where it's kind of like really interesting from an ISO perspective of like, do I really want to build this? Do I really want to buy a gateway? Whatever, depending on the size, like whatever it is, versus saying, well, okay, I can have card present, card not present, virtual terminal, invoicing, everything, and fully white labeled under my solution. So I love it. Last question I have for you is a little bit different, a little bit, we're zooming out quite a bit here. But I'm always asking everybody this question these days when we see the ISOs and ISVs. So, how do you see this playing out? I mean, we see ISVs becoming ISOs. We see ISOs buying ISVs or building their own software solution or whatever. And so, you know, what do you think that how is this going to play out over the next 3 to 5 years as you look into your kind of crystal ball, right? That doesn't really exist, but
Yeah.
what's your best guess there? And then what do, these organizations need to do to adjust to this kind of new reality that we're facing?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I guess my advice or opinion on how the industry is going to trend in the future is I believe that ISOs and ISVs, one, you're already seeing it now. They're starting to get close to each other. They
Yes.
have to. You've got the
Marrying.
ISVs that have built, whether it's an ERP, CRM, or whatever,
Right.
they've built their own software and they need the payment solution. Well, what's the best way to get that payment solution? Talk to the ISOs because the ISOs are your industry experts, and that's really where the ISVs, rely on them. The ISVs, again, they want to take the path of least resistance. They're not interested in worrying about competing with their gateway provider either. So I think you're seeing that shake up now as multiple gateways have decided to offer underwriting and begin charging minimums with ISOs, which
Mhm.
opinion's crazy. And then now, we've even heard that they're charging basis points for level 3 when they don't even touch interchange. It's getting too convoluted and you really need to keep it simple. And there's all different types of partners. So you might have a partner that, has thousands of merchant accounts, and then you've got another partner that's got 4 or 5 merchant accounts. We tailor to both sides. We don't want to charge you minimums and hurt or push away that business. It's foolish to do that. So the whole industry, it's kind of cool to see everything's changing,
Yeah.
right? And 15 years ago, technology was always awesome, right? You always looked for technology, but with the cloud and everything now and how you can just be
Mhm.
reliable, scalable at the same time and not have to worry about, hey, we signed up a merchant that's going to do, 2 million transactions a day. It doesn't matter. The
Yeah.
system will scale itself automatically. That's, and again, kudos to Jeff. Jeff is our mastermind here at FluidPay. So
Well, this has been really exciting, really very informative. Um, but what would you say, Nick, if somebody wanted to learn more about Fluid Pay, how to work with you all, where would you send them?
yeah, definitely. I'd say first check out our website, which is www.fluidpay.com. You can send us an email to sales@fluidpay.com or give us a call at 630-526-8670. If you want to email me direct, you can too, and I'll help you with whatever. My email is nick@fluidpay.com. But the website will be a good place to start. The API is public and fully exposed there, and all of the products are listed there with blurbs about how they work and kind of the sales slick, if you
Excellent,
want to call it.
excellent. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Nick, thank you so much for your time today and your expertise. Really appreciate you sharing that with our audience today.
No, thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure.
This podcast is sponsored by Nativia Banking. And, really this year, Patty, Nativia is kind of rolling out a full suite where they're saying,
Mhm.
it's not just banking anymore. It's like, how does banking fit in with processing? How
Right,
does it fit in with terminals? And so now, they just rolled out same day funding
right,
that they can get
right.
when they have Nativia Banking together with the payment processing. So a lot of really cool stuff going on there. If you haven't got in on this yet and you want to check it out, head over to
Check it out
Nativia.
now.
Yeah, nativia.com/banking, nativia.com/banking. Learn how you can build a portfolio that provides both banking services while at the same time providing payment processing. Guess what Square has? They have banking services and payment processing. So if you really want to be competitive, you really
You
want to
have to,
offer both.
yeah.
Hey everybody, I'm here today with my good friend Rich Norton. How you doing today, Rich?
I am doing super fantastic. It's always great to speak with you. And I want to thank you for all the stuff that you do for all of our merchant service reps. And I love the fact that you do everything with integrity. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
My pleasure. Same to you, my friend. So, we are doing this little mini series. I'm really excited about it. We're helping people that are brand new to the payments industry. They have no idea what we're talking about. So, Rich, I think a great place to start is an elevator pitch. Like, why should anybody consider getting into the payment space right now as a sales professional?
This is an incredible opportunity. And as I tell everybody coming into the business, this is as big as you want it to be. I have about 200 representatives all around the country. And what's amazing, they come from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds. And it doesn't matter if you've had sales experience or no sales experience. The most important thing that I look for is desire. So if you have desire, you got dreams. Everybody in this life has dreams inside of them, and they don't have the right opportunity to achieve those dreams. And this business is incredible. It's been amazing. It's been a blessing for me. Where I'm at in life, I celebrate everybody coming into the business, knowing if I can be a part to help them have
Yeah,
success in the industry. So it's
love it.
amazing. It's an incredible
I
opportunity.
love it. I love it. So, somebody comes into the industry, they get started day one, and they're coming on to a team like yours, the super crew. They're like, what do they need to do? What are the things they need to be thinking about day one?
Great question. So it's important to understand that you cannot do this business part-time. I mean, if
Mm,
you put part-time into the position, you're going to get part-time results. So I tell everybody coming in, go all in, have 100% determination, make a commitment. That's important. Go along with that desire. If you make a commitment to the business, you're going to have success. This is your business. As I stated, this is as big as you want it to be. So you have to treat it like your business, and you have to treat it like a full-time job. So step one is write out your goals. What do you want to accomplish in this industry? And I'm talking about good, positive, realistic goals. What do you want to accomplish in your first 30 days? How many merchants do you want to write? What do you want to accomplish this year? Can you make six figures your first year in this business? And the answer to that question is yes. If you're with the right team, you're with the right company, you got a great support network. So treat this like your business, get it prepared. I mean, there's so many different things that we can cover, like how to set your business up.
right.
Do you do an LLC? Do you do a sole proprietor? And we can get into all the things about
Right.
separating your personal from your business. All that's important. So I'm sure we'll cover that
Yeah.
also.
Well, and the thing I love about that, Rich, is it goes right into this idea of the importance of having this, mentor or coach, right? That's going to work through it. And so I think it's a great opportunity since I know, you're sponsoring these videos that we're doing, right, with your team. Talk a little bit about that. When somebody comes in first day, give us the real brief kind of overview of like, what does that look like as far as someone working with them to make sure everything is set up correctly and they're positioned for success.
Absolutely. See, most people, and I've talked to hundreds and hundreds from different merchant service companies, and no knock on any of them, but most of them, and a story that I hear a lot, is they feel like they're Lone Ranger representatives. They're like, I
Right.
want to have success in this industry. I want to make it happen, but I don't even know where to begin. What
Right.
do I say when I walk in? What is this program? What is consumer choice? What are the different products? And they get overwhelmed, and a lot of them don't start because they don't know where to start, is the bottom
Yeah.
line. So what
Yeah.
we do when we take someone into the business, I've got an executive team right now. We've revamped this up, and I got 3 different guys that are part of that team. I have field leaders that work with our representatives. but every representative that comes in, I created a university. I'm doing videos too, like you, and
Yes.
we've got 18 videos. And at the end of each video, there is a little quiz, and they can't move on to the next video until
Right.
they pass that quiz right there. But we take them through from what we just talked about, how to get your business started, how to work out a plan. We take someone in the field so they can watch someone working in the field. I think, to me, that's very important, so you can see how it's done. And the team leader and our executive team work with each one of the representatives each day. And the number one goal is to get them writing merchants right out of the gates.
I love it. So, Rich, we're going to end the video here, but before we do, I want you to quickly just give, where would you send people if they want to learn more about working with your team?
So you can call me directly. I'm available. You know, a lot of times people say, Rich, I know you're busy. I don't want to bother you. I don't want anybody ever thinking that. In fact, I scold people when they tell me that. I may not answer my phone, but you can text me at 904-434-4635. You can email me at payrock, P-A-Y-R-O-C, Rich Norton at gmail.com. You can get on our website. We have the super crew of Payrock, #1 team with Payrock right now. And I have to brag on them. We have a trip coming up in April where there's 42 representatives from Payrock that have won this trip to Cabo San Lucas. 26 of them came from our team. So
Wow.
proud of our team, very proud of our team.
That's awesome. Well, Rich, thank you so much. I'm enjoying already this little mini series that we're going to be doing. In the next one, we're going to talk about compensation. So for those of you that are brand new, you're understanding, okay, I can structure my business. I need to set goals, all these core things, having a mentor. But the question is, how do I survive financially as I get this going? So hang around and we're going to answer that one in next week's video.
You know, James, there's been a bevy of activity around service fees and so-called junk fees in recent months, and I think it's worth paying attention to this. President Biden, in his State of the Union address, touted the government's fight against so-called junk fees, from concert ticket purchases to banking services. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has been leading the charge. It recently issued a rule capping credit card late fees at $8.
Right.
Now, the U.S. Chamber of Congress quickly sued to stop the rule from taking effect. As an aside, currently, I did a little bit of checking. Late fees average about $32.
Oh, wow. That's a big cut.
So that's $8 to $32. That's like a 75% cut
Yeah, that's a big revenue line item for a lot of those companies.
for a lot of those companies. Yeah. Also in DC, the city council has capped restaurant fees at 20% and requires that they be prominently displayed. The law also includes a safe harbor that protects law-abiding restaurants from being sued over service fees. I have to tell you, DC is really bad. There's because it went to a higher minimum wage before a lot of other people did,
Right.
and then of course it had the fees that it was adding on because of COVID and so forth.
Right.
But I was out to dinner not long ago with a bunch of friends, very well-heeled friends, shall I say. Financially well-off people who were poring over the bill to see what service fees they were charged.
Right. Right.
Whereas I'm just like throwing my card in and say, just,
Right. Right.
just shows you the difference, but,
Right.
but there are, a lot of cities, that have passed laws capping the fees, for example, on food delivery services.
Okay.
And here's a story that came by that, passed my, my radar that just blew my mind up, because New York City is suing DoorDash because the food delivery service, it admitted that it had charged a Harlem hamburger joint nearly $14,000 in bogus delivery fees.
Wow.
14,000. Now it offered to settle for 7,000. That's according to the city's lawsuit. The city said, forget it, man, but it alleges that overbilling by DoorDash is widespread in New York City, and that it violates apparently New York, like DC, has a 20% limit on takeout service fees imposed in the city. So, I'm just putting a lot of this out because I think we need to be mindful as an industry to the trend towards service fees on just about everything, and the potential negative implication that might have for differential pricing. I simply think we need to take care not to get caught up in what's emerging as a public outcry over what's being depicted as a culture of service fees.
Yeah.
know.
Well, yeah.
And on
and
the
I-
other hand, this is not to say I disagree with differential pricing. And as a matter of
Right.
fact, I think it's a great idea, but I just think we need to be mindful,
Right.
especially in urban areas.
Well, and I think also it's like it goes back to kind of the way you're presenting it, right? So
Yes,
there's a differential. The question is, how is that difference displayed?
right,
Is it a cash and a card price where there's maybe this perception that, oh, I save money if I pay cash?
right.
Or are you still presenting it as a line item of, hey, I'm increasing, by a certain
And
amount?
that's what people are,
So,
really object to. Like my
yeah.
friends I was telling you about, they were going over there were several line items. I was quite surprised, what I don't drink, they do. There was a surcharge on their booze. I mean,
Right.
really?
Right. Yeah. It's like you got to pay extra if you want to drink. So,
Good thing people like you and I, that's where we save our money, James.
there we go. Yeah. Yeah. It really is.
That and the
actually.
fact that
Yeah.
that and the fact that I have not had a cigarette now in over a year, almost a year and a half.
Wow, that's amazing, Patty. I know you smoked for a long time. So.
Actually, it's been over a year and a half. So I congratulate myself.
Yeah, congratulations to you. Well done. That's fantastic. So, well,
And
yeah,
in fact, I saved so much money that I'm gonna buy myself a present with all the money that I saved.
there you go. You deserve it. So awesome.
Thank
Well,
you,
Patty, yeah,
James.
definitely keep us in the loop. I know it's a big push of the Biden administration right now with the junk fees, and obviously that it wouldn't take
Yeah.
much for that to spill over. In fact, when he did the original in the State of the Union was talking about it, I was kind of holding my breath, waiting for him to say
You and me
credit card
both.
fees. So yeah,
You and me both. When he
easily.
said about the credit card, it was like that you could easily just spin that around.
Right. It's like in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I hope one of his like staffers hasn't recently been in a store that had a non-cash adjustment. Because if so, that's going to be on his radar, right?
Yeah, agreed,
So,
agreed.
Anyway, but all right, awesome. Well, Patty, thanks so much. Good update.
Thank you, James.